Good morning, everyone. So it has been a long week. I apologize that I have not been keeping up with my daily Facebook Live. And I actually am sitting in my sister and brother-in-law's beautiful basement. That mural on the wall, Ryan took. It's a photo that he's manipulated hundreds of times to make into a beautiful print. So yeah, I apologize that it's taken me so long to do another Facebook Live. Dennis went to the ER this week. He has small gallstones and he has costochondritis in the cartilage of his rib, which is really painful, which is basically inflammation of the cartilage. And then I've been dealing with health issues as well, related to a lot of antibiotic use and allergies as a result. So I was really tired this morning. I did not go to church, which is so sad. But I'm feeling much better now that I got some rest. So I wanted to kind of circle back to this book, Trauma is Really Strange. And it's really funny because Dennis saw it and started reading it, and he didn't want to put it down because he was so enthralled by it. So I guess we could have a reading time this morning. And then I also bought the book, The Body Keeps the Score. So my sister is a clinical family and child psychologist, and she had this book laying around. I tried to find it at her place, but I couldn't, so I ended up purchasing it on my own. But this is supposed to be a really great book for trauma victims or people who are working through trauma. And the way that I came across this book at her house was I opened up to just a random segment, and whatever I opened up was perfect that day. It really got me thinking. So I thought to myself, if I'm going to be talking about trauma, then I have to get this book. So this book is called Trauma is Really Strange, as I said. It is by Haines, and it's really cool because it's like a picture book. So as you're learning or discovering about trauma, there's pictures to go along with it. And I apologize if it's not the best, for you to see. So it says, David Livingstone is maybe the ultimate Victorian heroic explorer. Check out his manly mustache. It says, I heard a shout starting, and looking half around, I saw the lion, just in the act of springing upon me. Growling horribly close to my ear, he shook me as a terrier does a rat. The shook produced a stupor similar to that which seems to be felt by a mouse after the first shake of a cat. And so then it shows a man getting almost eaten by a lion. And it says, it caused a short of dreaminess in which there was no sense of panic or feeling of terror. Squeeze any human being hard enough and they will disappear. It says, the dreamy stupor state is disassociation, an immobilization or freeze response. Disassociation is one of the strange things about trauma. If it can happen to our hero friend, it can happen to you. The goal of this book is to be a non-scary introduction to trauma. For many people, understanding what the brain is trying to do to protect them helps healing. Most of the bits of the brain that deal with overwhelming events are very old. Some of the reflexes we use respond to danger originated in reptiles. In fight or flight, resources such as oxygen, blood, and sugar are diverted to the big muscles and the brain. Primitive reflexes take over. Get me out of here now. And there's like a little alarm in his brain. Fight or flight or disassociation switch on really, really, really quickly, unless they are life and death scenarios long after the danger has passed. This is the big problem of trauma. The exciting news is that they can also switch off really quickly, even if they have been stuck in place for years. So the disassociation switch. We all have within us the ability to endure, recover, and learn from overwhelming events. That's great news. Let's look at some statements from clinical practice that demonstrate the strangeness of trauma. I feel as if I'm outside my body. So there's a picture here where his head is detached from his body. The next picture, it says, my legs are tiny and far away. So kind of a feeling of your body is not really your body. Also, disassociation can make us a bit klutzy. So this guy is walking into a pole. We lose connection with our body parts of our body. It's hard to stay present and grounded. So this is how trauma or disassociation feels. Disassociation can be terrifying, but it can also be hard to spot. The central feature is that the brain is in the habit of not feeling. So again, the longest 6 inches between your brain and your heart, right? Disassociation is difficult to identify as we don't know what we don't know. Old parts of the brain are trying to stop us from sensing, distancing us from the body, and limiting our perception. So our body is trying to protect us from feeling those really scary feelings of trauma or abuse or uncomfortable feelings. People can rely on thinking and function pretty well, but often report they feel cut off like an observer. Okay, moving on to the next page. I love these illustrations. So I can't get enough air in. So this guy is like tied with belts or seat belts. There is a knot of anxiety in my belly. That's not a good feeling. Thoughts keep invading me. It's an obsession I can't let go of. So the cyclical thinking here. And I can't keep still, my mind is racing. I'm sure all of you can relate to not being able to sleep because your mind will not stop thinking. These statements describe being stuck in the go quick fight or flight mode. The body feels as though everything is geared up for action all of the time, non-stop. Panic attacks and or rage are the last stops on this route. So about a week and a half ago, I think I mentioned this, I had what I thought was a panic attack while I was driving, but it turned out to be a flashback. So that's definitely something related to my trauma, where I had all the physiological symptoms of a panic attack, where I felt like I couldn't breathe, I was crying, I was hyperventilating, all just because of this image that I had that reminded me of my trauma of the crash. Okay, so the next page says, I'm shaking, is that normal? Shaking after a dramatic event is often associated with fear. Shaking uncontrollably feels bizarre and too much. So something my therapist told me about shaking is that it's the body's way of getting all that excess energy out. And when you think about an animal that, or like, for example, a bird that hits the window and it falls and it lays still for a little while, that's it going through this process to get the energy out. And then actually the bird may start to kind of move one wing and then move the other wing, and then before you know it, the bird's flying away. Whereas there are instances with people where we don't actually have a chance to get that energy out. So for example, with the car crash I was involved in, you can't flee or fight. You have to just, and you can't, your body doesn't even choose to freeze, you're just stuck in the car. And so one of the ways to process trauma from, a vehicle accident would be to get the energy out in the same way that, that this bird does. And there's another book called Crash Course. So if anyone has gone through, a troubling or traumatic car accident, I'd recommend that book for you. And so let's keep moving. Restless legs and tension. Shakes are very common when we are overwhelmed. Letting ourselves shake can be a very powerful tool and can be used like safety valve to clear excess energy. We can learn to interact with shaking rather than trying to dampen it down all of the time. Shaking can be uncoupled from emotional intensity. Shaking is best understood as a way of extinguishing fear and discharging all the energy mobilized for fight or flight. So the energy is what I was talking about. And then it says more on the strangeness of shaking later. So shaking is actually a good thing, even though it doesn't necessarily feel very good at the time. We can use three statements to help understand working with and overcoming trauma. Number one, there's trauma. Terrible things happen to human beings. That's what I've been trying to say. Terrible things happen to good